really fascinated about how our brain works. And I've spent a lot of time in my free time, like reading and learning about this. And I found like this particular topic to be like especially interesting because I felt that it really connects strongly with coaching. And it really, I think, can highlight some of the true power that coaching can give us. So I hope that you're going to find today's webinar both interesting, but also useful. And this is whether you're already an experienced coach, whether you're just starting your journey as a coach, or whether you're just here to see what's on offer. So I hope there's going to be something good to take away. I'd like to have some degree of interaction in this webinar today. So if possible, I'd love you to have your camera on. If that's not possible, then it's not a problem. But if you can like post in the chat when the time comes, just so we can have a dialogue today. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so I'd like to have everyone's thoughts initially just on the title premise, so you get what you expect, true or false. So in the chat, if you could just write what your answer would be, true or false, and let's get an indication of what you think. What is this loss of truths? Oh, there's one false. Sometimes, okay. Okay, great. We've got a few. I think a bit of a mixed bag here, which is great. So I'm hoping that by the end of the presentation today, you're going to hopefully have a deeper understanding of how you would answer this question. And so I hope that we'll come back to that at the end. So yeah, so as Lee said, that I'm going to talk about how our expectations can really influence and shape our reality, and look at some research that has been done that really shows the real world impact that they can have on various aspects of our life. And then taking a transformational approach, which is pioneered by Coach Masters Academy, I want to look at how we can really start to observe and recognize our expectations. And by doing this, increase our own self-awareness, which in turn will enable us to make better and more choiceful decisions. And I'm hoping that will lead to a better and more fulfilling life. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to introduce a couple of words, and I'd like us just to have a look at the like definitions or what we think these words mean for us. So the first one I'd like to introduce is beliefs. So would anybody like to just share their definition of beliefs? Feel free to type in the chat, or if you want to go on mic, that's also fine. Anyone? Yes, so Susan?
Hi, I raised my hand because beliefs is one of the things I find interesting. So it's an acceptance that something exists or that it's true. But the twist with beliefs, which I find fascinating, is it may not necessarily be backed by any proof. So your belief is just your belief.
Yeah, that's a great, thank you for sharing that, Susan. And yeah, that's a really succinct way to describe it. Exactly, yeah, it's basically you know, taking a proposition about something to be true, but as Susan said, it's not necessarily backed up by objective evidence. Not always. Great. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we'll keep going if that's okay. So the next one is expectations. So would anybody like to take a stab at giving a definition of expectations? John.
Yes. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I would say expectations are things that we think are going to happen, and that we have some, maybe not belief, but yeah, I would say things that we think will happen is my shortest answer, yes.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, so expectations, for sure, like something that we think could happen. And I think the key point I'd like to just emphasize is that expectations tend to be around the present or the future. So tends to be a time-specific content there, but also often our expectations are informed by our beliefs. So when we have a belief about something, it tends to inform the expectations. Great. So, and then something I'm not going to go into too much detail today about, but mindsets is also something else that I think is connected here. So mindsets are more around a cluster of beliefs and expectations, and mindsets tend to be more habitual and over an extended period of time. And one of like the most famous examples of that is like the growth mindset, where it's basically we see ourselves as a continuous work in progress, and that we are malleable. And this mindset has shown to have very positive impact in terms of people's ability to learn effectively. But we only have limited time today, so we're not really going to talk about mindsets. But if you're interested, definitely that's something I'm also very, very interested in. Okay, so let's move on. So I'd like just to take a moment to appreciate the brain. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've done some reading on this, and what I've come to learn is that there's an increasing number of neuroscientists who see the brain as a prediction machine. And it's very interesting how the brain works in that we create a simulation of our reality. So the reality that we all perceive is constructed by our brain. And of course, there is some stimulus or some input from the external world, but our brain is able to take that and to create a reality. But saying that the brain, in order to be efficient, it cannot process all the new data as new data each time. So it's more efficient than that. So what we do is we have sets of things like beliefs, expectations, or experience. And what these do is these give our brain something that it can use to predict. So it draws on these, and we can predict the outcome of things based on what's gone before. And that helps us to really construct the reality that we live in. And the good news is, well, thankfully, is that this reality that our brain constructs really is, or does coincide with objective reality most of the time. So that's how we're able to function. But however, if I think probably you can see, like, from this, there are some potential pitfalls here, because not everything will equate exactly with objective reality. So sometimes the reality we see is not exactly what's objectively there. But the brain is really required to do that in order to make sense of the vast volume of data that it has to process. So what I'd like to do now is to try a little experiment and see if I can help alter your reality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture, and this is a black and white image. And I'm going to show you it for about 10 seconds or so. And I'd like you to look at it and try and make sense of what this image is. Sound okay? Okay, so let's have a look. So here's the image. Okay, so could anybody make sense of that image? I'm seeing a few like confused faces. Okay, so yeah, it just looks like a black and white kind of squiggle. So let's give you a context word here. So the context word is pet. So I'm going to show you the picture again and then have another look and see if you can make any more sense of this. Oh, interesting. We've got some really interesting samurai, a dog kissing a man, dog. Okay, I'm not going to frustrate you any longer. So let's have a look at what this image is actually taken from. Okay, so it's a bulldog wearing a baseball cap. So now I'd like you to look at the picture again, and can you see it? So the interesting thing about this is that this picture has not changed. This is the same picture that I showed you a few moments ago, but now your brain is seeing something totally different because I gave you an expectation to see this dog. So you saw the photograph, and now when you see this black and white picture, your brain is now construing that as this dog. So this is something I think is really quite important, because reality, the picture has not changed, but our brain has. And so it's actually quite easy to change our reality just by giving a slight nudge to the expectations that we have. And one thing I'd like to look at later is how a transformational approach can help us to notice and observe our own expectations, because a lot of these are unconscious. So that's the tricky part here. So we're going to have a look at that later on. But first, what I'd like to do is just take a moment to just emphasize like how important this is in terms of our brain and our body. So our central nervous system, particularly our brain, really has an astounding impact on our body and our physiology. And this is something that really is super important for, if we think of well-being, you know, our physical health is crucial to that. And so it's really important, I think, to have a really good appreciation of how important the brain is in regards to our physiology. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on to the next part, where I'm going to talk about some experiments, and hopefully you're going to get a very clear understanding of how sometimes this can happen. So the first experiment I'd like to talk to you about is one that was done by Dr. Aliyah Crum at Yale University. And there were a group of participants, and they were told that they're taking part in a study of how gut peptides responded to different calorific inputs. So there's a gut peptide called ghrelin, and ghrelin is often referred to as the hunger hormone. So when you're hungry, this peptide increases. And then when you're full, when you're satiated, this decreases. So that's basically all you need to know. So this hormone, when you're hungry, it will go up, and when you're full or satiated, it's going to go down. And the participants were presented with 2 milkshakes. So one milkshake was labeled indulgent, and as you can see, it was labeled high fat, high sugar, 620 calories. So something you don't want to be drinking this every day, but very, very indulgent, luxurious. On the other hand, there was another milkshake labeled like the sensible diet shake, so Sensi shake, I think it's called. And this one is low fat, low sugar, and only 140 calories. So really quite, I think, the healthy option. And these participants drank both milkshakes over an extended period of time. And then the ghrelin response was measured. So let's have a look at this response and tell me what you think about it. So this is the data from the paper here. So you can see the time 60 minutes, there's the ghrelin decrease response happens after ingesting these milkshakes. And you can see in the dark gray, this is the indulgent one. And there's really quite a steep decline in the ghrelin levels. On the other hand, the sensible like diet shake, there is of course a decrease in the ghrelin because they've consumed as something, but the dip in ghrelin is much less obvious, much less pronounced comparatively. But there's a catch here. So the catch is that this study wasn't really about the ghrelin response. Actually, it was about the impact that the mind can have on physiology. And in reality, the indulgent shake and the sensible shake were actually the same one. And this was a medium fat, medium sugar, like medium calorie. So I just want to show you that result again. So based on just reading the labels, these participants had a very different response to each milkshake. And the feeling of being like satiated by the milkshake was clearly different based on this response. So for me, this is really quite an amazing like result, just showing how the expectation of this milkshake being indulgent versus this milkshake being healthy really impacted the physiological response to that. And if you think about it a little bit more, this has quite a lot of implications for if you're making decisions. For example, if you're in a restaurant and you're choosing what you think is the healthy option, and you're expecting this is the healthy option, but you might still feel hungry afterwards because you feel, oh, it's not really going to fill me up. It's just I'm just trying to be sensible today, and then you might end up choosing a dessert because you're still hungry. And so, but the reality is, it could be that your expectations are really responsible for this. So I think there are a lot of real world like ramifications for this, especially things like labeling. But of course, this is something that we're not necessarily conscious of. Okay, so I'd like to move on to a different experiment. And so this next experiment, this was done also by one of the same researchers, Alia Crum, and then Ellen Langer at Harvard University. And this time we're looking at a group of hotel cleaners. And as you can imagine, hotel cleaners, they have a very physically demanding job. So they have to, walk around the hotel constantly. They're having to clean, they're having to make beds, they're having to hoover. It's really quite an intense job. But saying that, the kind of activities that these cleaners do, they're not really associated with like exercise. It's not like going to the gym and training or doing sports. And so the hypothesis of the researchers here was first that few, if any, of the cleaners would really be aware of the sheer amount of exercise that they do and their job entails. And then, as we know, that expectations can have an impact on our physiology. They also thought that the cleaners were perhaps not getting the full benefits of all the physical activity they were doing. So what they did was they did a survey of the cleaners to ask them about assessing how much exercise they do. And the interesting thing here was that 67% of these cleaners responded that they did little to no exercise. And actually 1/3 of them said that they did no exercise whatsoever. So you can see really that they didn't attribute their work as something that's giving them a physical workout. And what they did was they measured the subjects' like health stats, so things like blood pressure and their weight. And then they split them into two groups. And the first group, what they did was they offered them information and details about the physical demands of their job. So for example, they gave them information like changing bed linen for 15 minutes consumes 40 calories, or cleaning bathrooms for 15 minutes burns 60 calories. And then they also put posters in the break room of the cleaners, hotels, so that they could get a daily reminder of these kind of facts. And then a month later, they came back and they measured the participants' health stats. So would anybody like to take a guess at what the results were? You can put in the chat if you like.
Claudia, once I think.
Claudia, do you want to? No, no. Okay, Susan again.
Hi. I would say they would probably have better health stats. I would even posit that they had probably lost some weight and when generally healthier position.
Great. Yeah, and that is spot on. That's exactly what happened. So just to like clarify, like they reported that they didn't do any more exercise than they were doing before. So it wasn't like they were doing push-ups and pull-ups in between cleaning people's rooms. They were just keeping the same amount of exercise. And yeah, what happened was the cleaners who had been given this information, they had an average weight loss of 1 kilo, so just in 1 month, so average. And then additionally, the average blood pressure decreased from elevated to normal. So just by really making them aware of their physical exercise and how they perceive their job, really very small shift, they were really able to improve their health. On the other hand, the cleaners who were the control group, who didn't get any of this information, showed no change at all. So again, this is just, I think, another really interesting experiment that shows how the mind can really have I think, astounding effects on the body. And like when I read these papers, it really made me start thinking about, well, like how can we do this? How can we make these shifts? Because they sound to me to be really quite beneficial in a number of ways. And obviously the instigators so the researchers are instigating these kind of changes here. But I'm wondering like how we could do that for ourselves. And one of the real like I think amazing things about transformative coaching is that, you know, one of the tenets is that thinking creates reality. And so what we have with this, you know, transformative coaching process is that we can make these sustainable changes through gaining awareness on how we perceive our current reality, and then how we can construct meaning from that. And then using what we learn from gaining this understanding, you know, we're able to really create a new frame of reference that can really help us, you know, inform our future actions. And so I was thinking, like, how could this be applied to this situation? And so what I'd like to do is like taking a transformative approach here. So for me, I think the first thing that is the biggest challenge here is that all these expectations and beliefs that we have, they tend to be unconscious. So we're not really aware of having these. And so it's quite challenging to say, well, let's make ourselves aware. So of course, coaching conversation is clearly one of the most effective processes to do this, because through having a conversation with the coach is able to make observations and really allow the client to maybe uncover some of these things that they were not originally aware of. But the first step for me is really observe. So we need to observe in order to learn more and become more aware. So first is trying to observe. But thinking about this, this is not so easily done. And what I decided was, well, I think there's really two areas that we need to think about here. And the first one is language, and then the other one is thought. Now, language and thought are very closely related. I think a good way to think about it is that language is something that thinking is done in. So you could almost describe it like a painter. So the painter has the original idea for a painting, and language is the paint, and that's how it's connected. But of course, language in terms of the paint will affect how the painting turns out. So what colors are available, what palette is there. So the language we use definitely can influence our thoughts. But they do exist, I think, in terms of interconnected relationship here. So I'd like to let's spend a little bit of time thinking about language. So here's a word that I hope all of you are familiar with. Maybe some of you have direct experience of this. It's the word stress. And what I'd like us to do is to just do a quick word association. So I'd like you to think of words that you associate with stress. And we're going to do this in a Menti poll. So I'll just give you the link here. Two seconds. Yeah, here's the link here. You can use the QR code if you like. And I'd like you just to think of words that you associate with stress, particularly verbs. I'd be grateful if you could come up with some verbs too that you associate with stress. So, and then we'll have a look on the Menti board and see what you come up with. So I'll give you about 60 seconds if that's okay to come up with that. Wow. Any more verbs? Can you think of any more verbs? Okay, great. Thanks very much for your input. That's yeah. So I mean, my initial gut feeling from reading this, there's quite a lot of negative words associated with stress. I think that would be a fair comment. Yeah, there do seem. I think by and large there seems to be more negative negative words, but I can see also a few positive words here, which is really interesting. So I think what I would say is a really interesting point here is that just by doing this word association, we can see that maybe a number of people here have quite negative association with stress. And so what we can do is, well, we can recognize that here. So the language we associate with this particular word tends to be in a loss frame or negative frame. And what we can do is we can reflect on this. And obviously in a coaching conversation, we have the space to reflect, and the coach is going to be able to make inquiries that will hopefully allow a deep reflection here. But we can also do that, I think, ourselves by thinking about, well, how are we associating this kind of word or this kind of thing. And then something that I think we can also try is to try and reframe. So for example, if we have a sentence, I'm trying to cope with stress. So when you say cope, it's really, it's already very clear that it's something that is to be like persevered through or endured. But if you were to change that verb into something different, so if you were to say, I want to work on how to utilize stress, or perhaps how to leverage stress, or maybe embrace or I want to harness. So you can see that just by changing the words that we use, and perhaps the words that we use to think in, we can really create a different feeling of that subject matter. So if you're saying, I really want to work on welcoming my stress more and be able to harness it and then embrace it, it creates, I think, a lot more positive image there. So let's take this example and have a look at an experiment here. So by the way, could anybody tell me what do they think is one of the most stressful situations that we tend to go through? Any ideas for very stressful situations?
For me, Mark, it's giving feedback to someone. Giving constructive feedback to someone's very stressful.
Right. Okay. That's thanks, Mick. So that's yeah, I think I can relate to that too. Yeah. So yeah, we got some other comments. So loss, divorce, war, trauma, making a presentation. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, we've got some quite they do sound quite stressful, these ones. Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example that I think probably we've all gone through at some point in our lives, and this one is exam stress. So we've probably all experienced this at some point in our lives. And there was an experiment done by a researcher called Jeremy Jameson at Rochester University, and he took a group of students who were about to take their GRE, which is the graduate records examination, which is, I think, done in America for people to get into grad school. And what he did was he took a group of students and he gave them a practice test to do under lab conditions. And he split them into two groups. And one of the groups were just let to do the exam. But before the other group took the exam, they were shown this statement here. Okay, so I'll just let you take a moment to read that. So this takes about maybe 40 seconds to read. So it's not particularly, you don't need to spend that much time dwelling on it. But again, I would like you to ask, what do you expect the result would be between these two, or the difference would be, if any, between these two groups? So does anybody want to take a guess of what the difference is? Okay, mix. So the majority their scores would increase, but not all. Yeah. Great. So let's have a look, shall we? So they did the practice test, but then more interesting was they actually analyzed the actual test scores when they took the GRE for real. So, and this is where I think the data is more interesting. So they had a look at the groups, and there wasn't a huge difference between the groups for most of the sections, except one, and that was the math section. And so you can see here that students who read the statement, they had an average score of 770, whereas the students who hadn't read the statement had an average score of 706. Now, one of the potential explanations of this is often math causes the highest level of anxiety among students. I can see some people agreeing here, yeah. And so just this reframing of that anxiety allowed the test takers to perform better. And I think the interesting thing about reframing is that the feeling of anxiety is still there. It's not as if it's being ignored or it's reducing that. They still have the feeling of heart beating faster, maybe sweating, that's still there. But how they see that is different. And the way that they perceive that has changed, because they now have a different expectation. So they're expecting this anxiety to actually help them. And so rather than saying this is impeding my performance, they could be thinking this is helping my performance. And as you can see here, there was a clear difference in the result. So I think, again, this just goes to show that reframing is something that I think is really like a powerful tool that we can apply. And in this case, you know, there's quite a big points difference. So this could be the difference between getting into grad school versus not getting in. So it does have real consequences in you know, real life here. Okay, so we've had a look at reframing, and then we've had a look at basically observing, recognizing, reflecting, and reframing. And so, of course, not all of us are able to take coaching sessions 24/7 whenever we need it. So, of course, coaching is one of the best processes to follow this approach. But I think there are some other things we can do a little bit easier by ourselves. And one of these things I think that is a good way to do this is journaling. So one of the benefits for journaling is that if you just allow your mind just to think and then write down whatever comes to mind, you're getting quite I think a fairly unfiltered thought process. So the words you're using, I think, are coming you know, onto the paper. And what you can do is you can recount things, or you know, write about your thoughts about specific things. And then we can take a similar approach here. So we can read back what we've written and start to observe like the language that we've been using. So it might be quite striking how many negative words you use around this specific person or thing, or you know, work-related task. And so just taking a step back and putting on your observer's hat and reading what you've written, I think can really help give an indication of how you're thinking about this kind of thing. And then, for example, if you wanted to take it a step further, if you recognize that you are perhaps unhelpfully negative about a specific thing, you can maybe try and substitute the words with more positive ones and see whether like reframing it would make any difference. So that's just, it's again, in the coaching process, this will be done through, you know, spoken language, and the coach is able to really work with the content that the client has produced. But also we can do some self-reflection here, and we give ourselves some chance to be aware. There are a lot of other benefits to journaling that I think are well documented, but that was just another suggestion that I would have to try and you know, give a practical takeaway here. And then the other thing I mentioned previously was thought. So we focused on language here, but then thought is something else that clearly is another thing that we need to try and observe. And that's, I think, a lot more difficult to do by yourself. Saying that, there are practices that are easily done and easily available that for sure have a very, very positive impact here. I think mindfulness would be the most obvious example, mindfulness and meditation. And the reason that these are so effective is that you're providing yourself with space, and the longer you can practice that, you can start to identify thoughts as they come in, and you can observe them. And rather than being attached to the thought or thinking that the thought is me, you can see it for what it is, and it's just thought. And I myself, I'm not a experienced practitioner of that, but I have read that the longer you practice these types of techniques, you can really observe your thoughts and have a much more objective view of them. And it doesn't need to say that you're judging them or evaluating them, but you can let them come, and just having that space definitely is a way for us to be a little bit more aware of you know, how we're thinking and the thoughts that are in our head. Great. So I'm conscious of our time here. Just to give a summary of what we've covered, because I think we've covered a few things. The expectations can shape our reality. And I hope you can remember from the dog picture that it's quite easy to now change someone else's reality and your own reality. And just a footnote, when you see that picture of the dog or the black and white image, even a week or 2 weeks from now, you're still going to see the dog. So it can actually have quite a long-lasting impact here. So expectations shape our reality, and they can be influenced for better or for worse. So if you look at the milkshake study, the relatively medium calorie milkshake was digested more like a high calorie milkshake. So it could have, you know, if people were being particularly malevolent, you could try to influence people that way. But they can be altered and they can be influenced. But really the transformative approach is, I think, the most really prudent way for us to try and take control and to at least try and build our self-awareness here. So first is to observe what are our expectations, and through that, like what language are we using, what do we associate with this kind of thing, and then recognize these other patterns in how we're perceiving certain things, certain people, certain activities, and reflect on that. And then I hope the exam study gave you an indication of how reframing is also a potentially a very, very helpful way to really take something that is a detriment to us and turn it into a positive. So I hope that's something else that you're going to be able to take away. And then some things that you can do by yourself. So journaling, I really recommend it. It's something that I think the more you do it, the more benefit you'll get. But being observant and, you know, applying this framework to even your own journaling, I think will be something that you'll be able to discover perhaps things that you were not conscious of as you were writing. And then finally, mindfulness. So mindfulness as a practice, especially for any of us who are coaches, this is, I think, something that is essential for us to really try and build our capacity. And so this is something I think many of us are already doing, but for sure it has another benefit of us being able to be a bit more observant of ourselves and a bit more aware of ourselves. And then just to finish, so you get what you expect, true or false. Now, I think your answers might be the same. They may have changed, but what I'm hoping is that your understanding of why you think that is now a little bit clearer. So that's everything from my presentation today. So I think we have some time left for a Q&A. So I will pass it back to Louise.
Thank you so much, Marc, for such an interesting presentation with very rich content. So anyone has any questions for Marc? Well, may I say something? Yeah, someone is raising their hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
That was amazing, Marc. That was so cool. And if we can harness that stress, if we can harness this, we can solve the world's problems. This is just amazing. Thank you so much for this presentation. Where my question is, and I feel like really out of my depth here, but kind of leveraging on the work of Daniel Goleman around emotional intelligence and also emotional regulation. And I'm thinking about that, the math test, where the difference was 770 to 706 or something like that. And then I'm thinking about your process of journaling, which is also something I do every day as well. And it's very powerful. How much of it do you feel is just the process of noticing and naming the emotion that you're feeling, whatever it is, a positive or negative emotion, shifts you away from the root brain to the neocortex? So I'm thinking about that math exam, right? So if your root brain is activated and you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, your energy is focused on the root brain and you're not ready for complex calculations at that moment. But the process of noticing and naming the emotion shifts you from the root brain to the limbic, or the root brain to the neocortex, and therefore you can concentrate. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, Mick. And I would say, like, I definitely agree that the process of just noticing and naming that emotion, I think that creates a huge shift, because rather than them being in the emotion and in the anxiety and it's like surrounded, you're able to step back and just notice it. And I think, like, especially in something like the maths section, I think that would definitely have a big impact in terms of the, you know, cognitive function, especially like those kind of processes. So yeah, for sure, I think just the process itself probably is very, very impactful.
Yeah,
Does that
cool.
answer your
All right.
question?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Marc. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? And I would love maybe someone from faculty, in fact, to maybe make some comments, because you related very much your presentation to transformative coaching, and maybe it would be interesting to hear some of your reflections. Someone would like to share their thoughts and their reflections?
Yeah, can I share my thought here? It reminds me of our core training. If we remember well, our transformative principle, number 1. What is that? Direct the mind towards, you know, positive and possible. I think that this it's kind of maybe not the same thought, but the same ideas of that. Is go through what we are focusing on. It's with our intention to see things in the positivities. And I think that it's just lead our mind or direct our mind towards that area of positive and creativity kind of things. So I think that's just what we have practice or what is in our core training is based on our study of the brain, how brain works. And I think that is yeah, I agree with you, Marc, and this is what I have just, you know, flashback to the screen, to the presentation that I'm just teaching last week about this. And yeah, thank you so much. This is very, very useful, and then it's confirm our principle about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamsu. And anyone else? Andrea, is she still connected? No? Any other faculty members? Or anyone else? I mean, you're welcome. My colleagues? No one?
I'd like to share some thoughts on this. Thank you very much, Marc, for that very deep, inspiring, and illuminating presentation. And it has application in different spheres of life. I'm very aware that when we're working with long-term patients who have chronic diseases, or when you're preparing patients for surgery, the patients who believe that they're going to come out tend to do better than those patients who go in pessimistic and thinking of worst case scenario. And so we can really apply this in different spheres of life, and life will happen. The unexpected will happen, but how can we reframe that unexpected in a way that is positive and that leads to possibilities beyond where that pain happened? So I think we can all use this beyond coaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. And Azadeh, can you talk? No, she's not. Okay.
Hello. Hi, I'm so sorry. I'm outside. Therefore, I'm not able to turn on my camera, but I just wanted to thank Marc for this great presentation. I enjoyed it so much. And thank you for bringing in also this importance of, it was interesting to see the impact of the language. And another thing that really stood out for me is the context. So that kind of reminded me of the framing, the importance of framing the context. that brought me to our training as well, how we the impact that we can bring by setting a context or by framing what we're able to observe for our clients. So thank you so much, Marc. A lot that I'm taking from today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Azadeh. Anyone else? Any questions for Marc?
I would love to say something. Marc, I would like to thank you. Really amazing presentation today. And as Piamsuk has mentioned, referring and relating to the core training when we've been learning that we create what we see, is today is we get what we expect. And I really enjoyed the way you shaped the presentation and this evidence-based approach, you know, really for me was mind-blowing. I really enjoyed when it's science proved and evidence proved, and it really made me reflect. And again, a big point about reflecting, reflecting on our experience and reflecting on our patterns, what we observe in our brain, in ourselves, while expecting something and getting a certain result or a certain outcome. Thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria. And yeah, Marc, really very interesting. And you know, when you said that brain creates simulation as reality, right? It triggered me. And you know what I was thinking about? Zelensky. I mean, he made a movie out of his real life now. I mean, I don't know if this can be, you know, considered an example. I don't know, but I mean, I think we are all astonished by this story, right? Maybe so, I don't know if you would like to comment on this, Marc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I can comment too much on like the, you know, Zelensky case, but for sure, yeah, like you know, we construct our reality, the brain constructs it, and I think that itself is quite difficult to really conceptualize, you know, but the fact that it can be altered and slightly, you know, can be slightly off from the objective reality, I find that really, really fascinating. It's really, the more you think about it, I think the harder it becomes to really get your head around it, so to speak.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments or questions or no? So, I mean, thank you very, very much for this. I mean, really wonderful presentation. It was so rich. I mean, a lot of different concepts, and also you gave a lot of very simple and impactful examples and tips. You also gave the journaling as a tip. Very nice. Any other tips, Marc?
Yeah, I mean, I think the anxiety one for sure is something like if you find yourself getting anxious in specific situations, really try and apply that if you can for real life. So think about, is this anxiety, you know, is it founded in anything real versus is it just something that you're experiencing and it's not going to actually really hurt you, and trying to apply that. I think for people who have maybe exam stress or like you know, giving feedback to people, things like that, it can be quite stressful. But you know, if we reframe it saying this is something that maybe I could utilize, or it might actually give me a sharper focus when I'm doing the task, just reframing that, I think it can really make an impact to your life. And I try and do that as much as I can myself. So definitely give it a try is maybe my advice. Just try it and see how it goes.
Okay, thank you. So Mick, for your nice feedback, right? Okay, so if there are no other questions or comments, okay, we can close this webinar. Yeah, and thank you to everyone for your participation and hope to see you in the next few events. Bye-bye. Ciao, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
great job, Louis.